I used to work overnights at a small convenience store in a pretty quiet part of town. It wasn't a bad job, just long, slow hours and the occasional sketchy customer. Most of the time, I just listened to music, stocked shelves, and counted the minutes until my shift ended. We had security cameras, but honestly, nothing ever happened. It was the kind of place where you could go a whole night without a single customer. That's why what happened still messes with me. It was a Thursday night, a little after 2 a.m. I was in the back storage room, unpacking a delivery. The only sounds were the buzzing of the old fluorescent lights and the distant hum of the refrigerators. Then, the front door chime went off. I paused. I hadn't heard a car pull up. I set down the box I was holding and stepped into the main store area. Nobody was there. I glanced at the cameras behind the counter. Nothing. The parking lot was completely empty. I figured maybe the wind had nudged the door open slightly and triggered the sensor. But right as I turned back to the stockroom, I noticed something strange. One of the aisle shelves, the one with the bags of chips, was slightly tilted forward. I had stocked that shelf earlier. It was perfectly fine. Now it looked like someone had bumped into it. I was about to brush it off when I heard something, a faint sound coming from the storage room behind me. A soft shuffle, like footsteps. I stood frozen for a moment, straining to listen. The sound had come from the back corner of the storage room, the part where we kept the old equipment no one ever used. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The dim emergency light flickered slightly, casting long, jagged shadows over the stacked boxes. Then I saw it, a pair of shoes, peeking out from behind a tall stack of crates. Someone was standing there, not moving, not making a sound, just hiding. My heart was hammering, but I forced myself to speak. "Hey, who's there?" No answer. Then, in the silence, I heard it, breathing. Heavy, slow breathing, way too deep to be my own. I turned and sprinted out of the storage room, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. I didn't hear footsteps behind me. I didn't hear anything at all. When the cops arrived, they searched the whole store. Nothing was missing, no signs of a break-in. But when they checked the storage room, they found something else. A small broken panel in the far wall. Behind it, an old maintenance tunnel connecting to the abandoned building next door. There were footprints leading inside, but no one was there. Back when I was in college, I worked the overnight shift at a gas station off a quiet highway, the kind of place where you could go hours without seeing another person. Most nights, I sat behind the counter, scrolling my phone, sipping coffee, watching the cameras. But every now and then, I'd get that weird feeling, like someone was watching me, like I wasn't really alone. One night, that feeling was stronger than usual. It was just past 1:30 a.m. The air outside was thick with fog rolling off the pavement in slow waves. It was so quiet that I could hear the buzzing of the streetlights outside. Then the door sensor beeped. I looked up. A woman had walked in. She looked to be in her late 40s, with stringy hair and a long, oversized coat. Her face was pale, almost sickly, and she moved in this slow, unnatural way, like she wasn't really in control of her own body. I gave her the usual, "Hey, how's it going?" But she didn't respond. She just walked straight past me, toward the coolers at the back. I watched her on the cameras as she stood in front of the glass doors, not moving. She wasn't looking at the drinks. She wasn't reaching for anything. She was just standing there. After a full minute, I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, do you need any help?" No answer. Then she did something that made my stomach turn. She tilted her head back, way too far. and stared directly into the camera. I felt my skin crawl. My first thought was that she was on something, maybe drugs, maybe just mentally unwell. I've dealt with plenty of people like that, but something about her eyes. They weren't just looking at the camera. She was looking at me. I stood up slowly, trying to figure out what to do. She hadn't actually done anything wrong, but I couldn't just let her stand there like that all night. Then, without a sound, she turned around and walked straight out the door. I let out a breath. Okay, weird, but at least she was gone. Except, she didn't leave the parking lot. She was standing next to a car at the edge of the lot. The fog was thick, but I could see her through the camera. She was staring at the building, at me. I locked the door. I didn't know what she wanted, but something about her made my skin crawl. Then, the worst part, the security camera screen glitched for a second. Just a flicker. But when it cleared, she was gone. The car was still there, but she had vanished. I checked the pumps, the street, the lot. Nothing. There was nowhere for her to go that fast. I waited for sunrise before stepping outside. The car, it was abandoned. And the police. They said it had been sitting there for 3 days, but no one had seen a woman. I used to work overnight at a shipping warehouse. It wasn't a bad job, mostly just scanning packages, loading trucks, and waiting around for deliveries. The place was huge, with high ceilings, metal shelves stacked with boxes, and only a handful of people working at night. Most of my shift was spent in one section of the warehouse, organizing shipments before the early morning trucks arrived. We had security cameras, but honestly, we never really needed them. Or at least, that's what I thought. The first time it happened. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was alone in my section, moving pallets. The only sounds were the distant beeping of a forklift and the low hum of the ventilation system. That's when I heard it. A knock. A single loud knock, coming from the far side of the warehouse. I stopped. The only thing back there was the old emergency exit. Nobody ever used it. It was locked from the outside, and the alarms would go off if anyone tried to open it. I waited, listening. Another knock. I grabbed my radio. Hey, is anyone near the back exit? Static. Then my coworker Danny's voice. Nope. Why? I hesitated. I think someone's knocking on the emergency door. A pause. Then he laughed. Bro, nobody's out there. That door's got a brick wall behind it. There's nothing but storage on the other side. I frowned. I had never really thought about that. The warehouse backed up to an empty lot. There was nothing but an old chain link fence and some overgrown grass back there. So who was knocking? I walked over slowly, my boots echoing in the empty space. The emergency door was a heavy steel slab with a tiny wired glass window at the top. I had to stand on my toes to see through it. The outside light flickered dimly. No one was there. I let out a breath and turned to walk back. Bang. I jumped. That wasn't a knock. That was a full force hit against the door. I turned back, my heart pounding. I didn't want to, but I had to check again. I stepped up on my toes and peered through the tiny window. For a second, I thought I saw something. A shadow moving. But it was too dark to be sure. Then, as I stared, the door handle started to move. I felt my stomach drop. The outside handle was twisting. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed my radio again. Danny, someone's at the back door. Another pause. Then, dude, that door doesn't have a handle on the outside. I felt ice crawl up my spine. I turned and ran back to my section, not stopping until I was near the loading dock. Danny came over a few minutes later, shaking his head. We both went back together. When we got to the door, everything was silent. No one was outside. The security cameras showed nothing but the metal handle. It was still slowly turning back into place, like someone had just let go.